Hip mobility is often neglected when it comes to fitness and physical health. Mobile hips help us squat deeper, jump higher, run with longer stride, and function optimally. Not to mention, it's important to tie your shoes. Immobile hips can cause lower back pain, aches, poor circulation, and even improper posture. It's important to work on flexibility of the muscles surrounding your hips and mobility of your hip joints. By improving hip mobility, we can properly train, perform compound movements, and move in a functional manner. Plus, you might be surprised how stronger you can get. Hello there. Today we're going to be talking about hip mobility, one of my favorite subjects. It is about understanding how hip mobility can improve your overall functionality and how it may assist in squatting better, lunging better, moving with more optimal ranges of motion, etc. So the first thing we're going to look at is the hip joint. The hip joint is a very complex joint, and it's a ball and socket joint, just like the shoulder. If you compare it to a joint like an elbow, which only does like extension and flexion, the hip joint, as the shoulder joint, moves in different planes, and it has higher ranges of motion. It has higher degrees of freedom. Within the hip, you can do flexion, extension, you can do abduction, adduction, you can do external or internal rotation, and you can also do circular motions. So why do you have tight hips? Immobilization of the hip joint, which is usually caused by sitting too much, causes short or tight hips. So the tight hips are described usually by muscles around the hips that are very tight, that disallow you to optimally function and move. This can result in hip tightness. It can disallow you to do certain functional movements like the squats or the lunge, maybe reduce your ability to do sprinting or long strides or long steps. It can shift the pelvis forward, so it can detrimentally affect your posture in a way that causes excessive curvature in the lower back, which is known as lordosis. This comes with aches, tight hips, low back pain, etc., etc. Point is, the main problem is immobilization or sitting too much. What is mobility and how to improve it? So mobility is basically a measure of the range of motion between two joints. So there's articulation between the two joints, and the range of motion in between those in different planes. So it can be flexion, extension, lateral, or medial flexion, which is abduction or adduction, internal, external rotation. The range of motion in these moves determines your mobility. Now, many times mobility is determined by different factors, and we'll look at all three of them. But essentially your mobility is your usable range of motion. Being more mobile means being able to squat deeper, to push with your shoulders overhead properly, to have optimal posture, to do all the functional movement patterns with optimal mobility or in optimal range of motion, etc. It's a combination of both stability, flexibility, ability of your muscles to stabilize, co-activate, contract under elongation, etc. To improve mobility, we need to move more. Now, to be more specific, we need to move in the functional or optimal ranges of motion. For example, we need to squat, to lunge, to push, press, pull, do all those movements. Now, many people confuse mobility for flexibility, and we'll cover what's the difference between the two. So there are three essential components to mobility, and flexibility is one of these. Flexibility is the ability of a muscle to lengthen or elongate, or how much a muscle can be elongated. Okay, so if you have very tight muscles, these will disallow you to move in higher ranges of motion because they can't stretch as much. Mobility has another part, which is strength, and strength in a sense of the ability to activate muscle, transmit force, co-activate different muscles to stabilize the joints, etc. Aside from flexibility and strength, mobility is essentially a combination of the two, in a way that when you go, for example, in a deep squat, you stretch out some muscles, but those muscles need the strength and the ability to contract under elongation, so to produce that tensile strength. So in a way, you're squatting down or pushing overhead. While some muscles are stretched, these muscles need to contract and stabilize the movement. So you need both strength and flexibility, and the combination of those in the proper use is what mobility actually is. So now is the time to go over the top 8 exercises we have for this. The top 8 exercises we have for this video. 4 of those are going to be more on the flexibility side, and 4 of those are going to be more on the mobility side of things. So first of all, flexibility, as we've said, is the ability of a muscle to elongate or just become longer to allow you to move in higher ranges of motion, right? Some of the stretching will initially cause adaptations that are more anatomical and actually make the muscle longer, and some of the stretching will cause acute effects which will allow you to adapt in a neural sense, so neural adaptations which will allow you to stretch out the muscle even further. The classic method of stretching for all these 4 stretches is around 2 sets on each side for 30 seconds stretch. So it's the classic self-stretch method where you're breathing deep, you're in a controlled position, you can control the stretch, and you're just feeling the stretch and trying to calm down, stretching up to a comfortable level. First one is the 90-90 hip stretch. This is one of the most versatile stretches out there. You're gonna find it on any hip mobility blog out there. It's very good because it stretches out large muscles around the hips, from the frontal leg, which stretches the outer muscles like the abductors and the glute minimus and maximus, to the rear leg, which stretches out the inner muscles like the inner thigh adductors and internal rotators. To perform the 90-90 hip stretch, you need to get seated, position one leg up front and externally rotate that hip. The other leg is back, internally rotated in the hip. Both knees are on the floor, but in the front leg the knee is resting on the external side, while on the rear leg the knee is resting on the internal side. Keep your back straight and you can hold up the stretch or even go deeper by bending forward. You can even perform 90-90 transfers. Then there is the cross ankle stretch. This is very easy, practical stretch I really frequently use with my clients. It's the easiest way to stretch the glutes. It can be controlled. You basically lie down on your back, cross your ankle over the knee, and you pull back. You control the stretch through controlling the force you exert by pulling the leg towards you. It mainly targets the gluteus maximus muscle. Lie down on your back, cross your right ankle over your flexed left knee. You do this by flexing your hip and knee in your left leg, then positioning your right ankle on your left knee. Do so by externally rotating the left hip. Grip your right thigh and pull your leg closer. Feel the glute stretch and relax. Another great stretch, the third one, is pigeon stretch. Now I would advise you, if you have some knee pain during this pigeon stretch, don't do it and use alternative exercise to stretch the glutes. But essentially in the pigeon pose, the front leg mainly focuses on stretching the gluteus maximus and minimus muscles, while your rear leg, which is back extended, really puts iliopsoas in a position which stretches him too. So it's a great exercise to stretch the glutes on the frontal leg, groins, and even like the iliopsoas hip flexor on the back leg. Set yourself in alternative lunge with your rear left leg's knee resting on the floor. Support your weight on your arms and shift the right feet to the left. Slowly, in controlled manner, externally rotate the hip so the knee of the front right leg rests down. At first, you support your body with extended arms, and then as you progress, you can go and lower on your forearms. Next stretch, one of the most popular out there for sitters, well, it's the hip flexor stretch. Your hip flexors, if you're sitting too much and not moving a lot, especially in squats and lunges, etc., are very tight. And this tightened muscle causes the pelvis to tilt forward, which causes excessive curvature in the lower back of the spine. And this causes pressure on these vertebrae here, especially on the L5 and L6, which increases, in a sense, compressive force in the spine. And this causes aches and low back pain. Set yourself in an alternative lunge position with your rear leg's left knee resting on the floor. Tilt your pelvis forward, straighten your back, lunge a bit deeper, support on your right leg and lift the opposite left arm up. Once you feel the stretch, breathe deeper and relax. As you progress, you can bend with your left arm and trunk slightly to the right. Repeat on the other side. Remember, you're lifting the arm on the side of the rear leg. Now onto the mobility side of things. So as we've said, mobility is a kind of a combination between flexibility and strength, and these mobility exercises mainly use different combinations of different movements that occur in the hip, like flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation. And when you combine all that, you can combine 2 or 3 or more of these movements in a sort of circular rotation manner, whether you do it inward or outward. So this is why our first exercise is hip circles. All of these mobility exercises are done in 2 sets, 5 to 7 reps, in a slow and controlled manner, where you're trying to really feel everything that's going on, warm up the muscle, try to increase the range of motion as you're going through all these mobility movements. The fifth exercise in the first form of mobility is the supported hip circles. So this exercise is one of the best I use for warm-up because it activates a lot of these muscles, not just in the hip, but also core and back, which connect to the hip. And it's great for warm-up to increase bodily temperature and sort of get all of these juices flowing in your hips so you can be more mobile during the workout. Do it in a very controlled manner. Feel everything that happens in the hips and try to slightly increase the range of motion with every circle that you do. Standing next to a wall, support your weight, lift one leg up and find balance. Slowly start performing hip circles on the leg that's lifted. Do 7 to 10 slow and controlled reps in full range of motion, both inwards and outwards on each leg. The sixth exercise, which I included, is a bit more of a stretching exercise, but it does push you into higher ranges of motion, so it's still like a combination between stretch and mobility. So the idea behind the supported deep squat exercise is that you don't have to co-activate and stabilize all the muscles around, which you do have to in a bodyweight squat or a squat with a barbell on. So basically support your weight, push backwards and fall down into a squat, stretching out all the key muscles that you need to enter a proper squat. In most cases, these are going to be the inner thigh muscles, like the adductors on the inner side. To perform, find a stable object you can grip. Then slowly lower your weight to set into the squat position and challenge your flexibility by going deeper. You can slowly progress this with elastic bends, which require slight activation from your side. The seventh exercise is the lateral lunge, or in yogic terms, skandasana. I also use this with my yogic clients and also in this kinesiology studio. So it's a great unilateral exercise that can affect and improve hip mobility on the side where the knee is flexed, but it also stretches out the muscles on the inner thigh, like the adductors, like adductor magnus, brevis, and longus. So all three adductors on the leg that's extended out on the side, while also activating the glutes, quadriceps, even some of the core and back muscles on the other leg with the flexed knee. It sort of imitates a one-legged squat while stretching the other leg that's put off the side. Position your feet wide apart and perform a lateral lunge on the right side. Go as low as you can so your heel still stays on the floor and your spine is upright. Stay in that position, feel the stretch in your inner thigh and go deeper as you progress. Further along, you can add a backpack to improve stabilization, of course in a controlled manner and lightweight. Last but not least, exercise number 8 is the Spiderman lunge. To me, lunges are the second most functional exercise for hip mobility you can do, of course, after squats. If you do them properly and tilt your pelvis, they're going to stretch your iliopsoas muscle, so the hip flexors, if you have them tight. Plus, we're adding a torso rotation, so thoracic mobility, which when you rotate the spine, you really stretch out some of the oblique and core muscles that are connected to the hip, but also you put those muscles around the hips in a different position where you can stretch them out even more effectively. Step forward with your right foot into a lunge. Tilt your pelvis forward, straighten your back and bend forward. Left hand on the mat to support your weight. On each inhale, rotate your torso, extending your right arm overhead. On exhale, close into the center and contract your abdominals. That's around it for this video, guys. Big thanks for watching. I hope you understood the importance of hip mobility and found some ideas about how to train your hip mobility muscles and which ones to stretch, which ones to strengthen, how to warm up before a workout, etc. Feel free to check out this blog right here. I've written on hip mobility. This one has also the flexibility part, the mobility part, and on top of that, the strength part, which additionally adds like 3 exercises that are crucial for stabilization of the lower body and building lower body muscle strength. So if you want the full combo and if you want to see some more research on this, just go and scroll through it. That's around it. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe and like. Bye.